She doesn't belong here. Look at her, walking around like she owns the place. Claudette Rowe's voice carries the particular flatness of someone who has made up her mind before a single word is exchanged. She is not whispering. She does not need to. That sentence, 11 words, is the first thing spoken inside Premier Porsche of Tampa on a Wednesday afternoon in late October. Claudette says it to Fletcher Odom, who stands beside her behind the curved reception desk, both of them watching the woman who just pushed through the glass door. Fletcher nods without looking up from his screen. Not agreement exactly, more like confirmation of something already assumed. If this story already has your attention, hit like and subscribe. What happens next is something you will want to see through to the end. The woman who just walked in is Jazmine Cole, 33 years old. She is wearing dark slacks, a plain charcoal jacket, and carrying a leather portfolio under one arm. No jewelry except a watch, analog, no brand visible. She is not dressed to impress. She is dressed to move. There is a difference, and it is one that Claudette misreads entirely. Jazmine does not browse. She does not drift toward the display vehicles or stop to run a hand along a hood. She walks directly to the reception desk, sets her portfolio on the counter, and waits. Her eyes move once, left to right, a single sweep, and then settle on Claudette. "I'm here for a vehicle pickup," she says. "Scheduled for 3 p.m. The name on the order is Cole. Claudette does not reach for a keyboard. She tilts her head slightly. "Do you have documentation?" "Yes." Jazmine unzips the portfolio. She removes a single folder and places it on the counter, open. Inside, a purchase agreement dated 6 weeks prior, a bill of sale, a Florida certificate of title application stamped by the county clerk, and a cashier's check receipt for the full amount, $41,200, paid in full. Claudette looks at the folder. She does not touch it. "This isn't standard," she says. "All vehicle releases require authorized dealership confirmation and presentation of original purchase documentation. Our records don't reflect a completed transaction under that name." She delivers this as if reading from a sign, which, as it happens, she almost is. The dealership's internal release policy is printed on a laminated card affixed to the wall behind the desk. Jazmine has already read it, every line. "The transaction was completed through your fleet and special order desk," Jazmine says. "Account reference 774-B. The coordinating contact was a Mr. Harlan. Mr. Harlan is not available today." Claudette closes the folder without examining its contents. "And until I can verify the account through our system, I can't authorize a release." There is a beat. 1 second, maybe 2. Jazmine does not argue. She does not raise her voice. She says, "Then I'll wait while you verify." She picks up the folder, closes it, and steps back from the counter. That patience, measured, absolutely still, is the first thing about Jazmine Cole that does not fit the category Claudette has placed her in. It unsettles Claudette in a way she cannot quite name. So she does what people do when they cannot name an unsettled feeling. She makes a phone call instead. She does not call Mr. Harlan. She does not call the fleet desk. She picks up the internal receiver, turns slightly away from the counter, and dials a number she has already decided to dial. 4 digits, an extension she clearly knows by memory. The call lasts 47 seconds. At the end of it, she sets the receiver down and turns back to the showroom floor. The woman she turns back to is still standing exactly where she left her. Not near the door, not restless, not checking her phone. Just standing there with the portfolio under her arm, watching the room the way someone watches a room they have already mapped. 12 minutes pass. Then the glass door opens again, not from the parking lot side, from the service corridor. Officer Derek Slade steps into the showroom. 41 years old, Tampa PD, uniformed, one hand resting on his belt at the hip. He does not look around the room the way a person arriving cold would look. He goes directly to Claudette, who meets him halfway, and they exchange less than 30 seconds of conversation. During those 30 seconds, neither of them glances toward Jazmine. Then Slade turns. "Ma'am," his voice has the quality of a door being closed. "I'm going to need you to step outside with me." Jazmine does not move immediately. "On what basis?" "We've received a report that the vehicle you're attempting to claim may have been obtained through fraudulent documentation." "That report is incorrect." She keeps her voice even. "The documentation in this folder was processed by this dealership's own staff 6 weeks ago. I'm happy to walk through it with you." "That's something we'll sort out outside." Slade takes a step toward her. "I'd like to understand the legal basis for this request before I comply." Not defiant, precise. She knows the difference, and she is walking it with the care of someone who has walked lines like this before. Slade does not answer the question. He takes another step and places his hand on her upper arm. The folder hits the floor. The papers scatter. A cashier's check receipt slides under the display stand of a 7-figure convertible. Jazmine does not reach for it. She does not struggle. She stands completely still while Slade positions her arms behind her back. And the sound that follows, metal on metal, 2 quick clicks, echoes off the showroom's polished floors. Claudette Rowe watches from behind the desk. Fletcher Odom has stopped looking at his screen. A young man near the service bay door, a dealership employee in a gray uniform with a name tag that reads Marcus, goes very still, like someone watching something he has seen before and did not expect to see again. Jazmine Cole's eyes move, just briefly, to the mounted camera in the upper left corner of the showroom. One look. Then she drops her gaze to the floor and says nothing. She does not need to say anything. Not yet. Slade walks her toward the exit. The folder remains on the showroom floor, papers spread. The cashier's check receipt is still under the display stand. The bill of sale, stamped, dated, notarized, lies face up under the fluorescent light. Nobody picks it up. Outside, the October air is flat and warm. A second patrol car is already in the lot. Corporal Bryn Talley steps out, notebook in hand. She and Slade make eye contact over the roof of his cruiser. Something passes between them, not words, an understanding. The kind that does not need to be spoken because it has been spoken before, many times, and everyone involved already knows their part. Jazmine Cole is placed in the back of Slade's vehicle. The door closes, and from inside the car through the tinted window, she can still see the showroom entrance, can see, faintly, the papers on the floor, the woman behind the desk already picking up her phone again, and the young man in the gray uniform who is no longer standing at the service bay door. Marcus has moved. He is standing near the display stand now, the one with the convertible. He crouches, picks up a single sheet of paper, and folds it carefully before tucking it inside his jacket. It is an action that takes 4 seconds. No one in the showroom appears to notice. Whether that is true is a different question. Slade's engine turns over. The patrol car pulls out of the lot. In the front seat, he says something into his radio that Jazmine does not fully catch, though 2 words land clearly. Fits the pattern. She files that away. Then she watches Tampa pass outside the window and thinks, quietly and without urgency, about all the things that are already in motion, and all the things that are not yet, but will be. Jazmine Cole has lived in the same apartment in the West Shore district for 3 years. 1,100 square feet, 3rd floor, no balcony. Her neighbors know her as quiet, punctual, and rarely available for conversation. This is not unfriendliness. It is economy. She allocates attention the way some people allocate money, deliberately, with a clear sense of what it costs. Every morning, without exception, she follows the same sequence before leaving. Wallet and credentials folder on the left side of the bag, keys to the right, a compact notepad in the outer pocket, phone, face down, on top. The sequence takes under 40 seconds and never varies. She noticed some years ago that the days she skipped it, in a hurry, distracted, were the days something went wrong, not because the sequence had any power over outcomes, but because the sequence was how she confirmed she was present, alert, fully in the day before the day began. It was discipline formatted as habit, which is the only kind that holds. She does not talk about her work in specific terms, even with the few people she keeps close. She describes herself as being in federal work, a phrase vague enough to be technically true and precise enough to end follow-up questions. She has a car, a 4-year-old sedan, dark gray, nothing memorable. She has a storage unit 2 miles from her apartment that holds, among other things, a locked metal case she has never opened in front of anyone. She has been in Tampa for this particular assignment for 2 months. The Porsche is not a luxury, it is a logistics requirement, specifically a vehicle authorized for use during the final phase of a separate operation, brokered through channels she cannot name, in a showroom. The purchase was legitimate in every respect. The paperwork was clean. The follow-through should have taken 20 minutes. That it did not is not surprising to her. Disappointing perhaps, but not surprising. The first time she encountered Premier Porsche of Tampa, it was not for the pickup. It was 6 weeks before, when the purchase was being finalized through the fleet desk. She had gone in person to confirm the order and sign the agreement. Mr. Harlan, the fleet coordinator, a thin man in his 50s with an easy manner and a habit of listening more than he spoke, had processed everything without incident. Claudette Rowe had been at the desk that day too. She had watched the transaction with the particular attention of someone who does not believe what they are seeing. When Jazmine had handed over the cashier's check, full amount, no financing, Claudette had picked it up, looked at it, and asked with a smile that did not reach her eyes, whether Jazmine was purchasing the vehicle as a gift. Jazmine had said no. The smile had not changed, but something behind it had. Fletcher Odom, the finance and contract manager, had appeared near the end of that first visit, seemingly by accident. He was not introduced. He positioned himself near the transaction, leafing through a binder, asking no direct questions. But once, when Jazmine had referenced a specific clause in the purchase agreement from memory, he had stopped turning pages. His eyes had moved to her, then back to the binder. He had not said anything. These are small things, the kind that do not individually constitute anything, but that accumulate, the way deposits accumulate, until the account has a balance large enough to matter. Between the first visit and the pickup appointment, Jazmine had returned once more, 2 weeks before the Wednesday in question, to confirm the release date with the fleet desk. Mr. Harlan was in a meeting. A junior salesman had met with her instead, a pleasant young man named Aaron, who apologized for the confusion and confirmed the 3 p.m. Wednesday slot with genuine helpfulness. He had also, Jazmine noticed, been gently redirected away from her by Claudette before he could finish the conversation. Claudette had taken over, confirmed the appointment in a tone that was perfectly civil and entirely cold, and walked Jazmine back to the entrance without being asked to. The young man in the gray uniform, Marcus, had been in the service bay doorway that afternoon too, working on paperwork. He had looked up when Jazmine passed. Their eyes had met for less than a second. Then he had gone back to his clipboard. Jazmine had noted him then, not with suspicion, with the specific quality of attention she paid to people whose discomfort was not hostile, whose expressions said, "I see what is happening and I do not know what to do about it." That particular expression was rare enough to be worth remembering. She had thought about this on the drive home. She had thought about the way Claudette had filed the folder without reading it, about Fletcher appearing where he had not been summoned, about the salesman being redirected. She had not done anything with those thoughts at the time. It was not yet necessary. What she had done, instead, was confirm the exact wording of Florida Statute 319.23, the state's requirement for certificate of title transfer, and verify that her documentation satisfied every element of it, including the notarized bill of sale and the county clerk's stamp. She had also confirmed the precise language of the dealership's own posted release policy, the laminated card behind the desk, and cross-referenced it against her paperwork. It checked out on every point. This is the kind of preparation that most people would find excessive. For Jazmine, it was simply how she moved through environments that had already signaled they would not give her the benefit of the doubt. You prepared for the terrain you were actually in, not the terrain you wished you were in. On the morning of the Wednesday pickup, she had laid out her documents in sequence: purchase agreement, bill of sale, title application, cashier's check receipt, and a copy of the correspondence confirming the 3 p.m. appointment. She had placed them in the folder in the exact order she would need them, anticipating the questions that would be asked, and one or two that probably would not be, but that she might need to answer anyway. She had arrived at 2:58 p.m., 2 minutes early, which she considered a minor concession to circumstances. The rest of that afternoon went the way it went. What Jazmine does not know, sitting in the back of Slade's cruiser, is that 2 days before the Wednesday pickup, Claudette Rowe had sent an email. The subject line was, "High-risk customer profile, action guidance." The recipient field included Fletcher Odom, and in a blind carbon copy, a third address that has since been redacted from the copy that will eventually make its way out of the dealership. The body of the email described a demographic and vehicle inquiry pattern warranting enhanced verification protocol. Language careful enough to say everything and admit nothing. She also does not know that Slade had been in the dealership's parking lot for 11 minutes before Claudette made the call. That he had arrived, in other words, before the situation Claudette would claim justified calling him had technically begun. These are things she will learn later. Right now, she knows only what she can observe. The time on the dashboard clock reads 3:22 p.m. The two officers in the front seat have not spoken to each other since the parking lot. And somewhere behind her, on a showroom floor in the West Shore district of Tampa, a young man in a gray uniform is standing near a display stand with a folded piece of paper inside his jacket. She does not know his name yet, but she has already counted him as a factor. The processing desk at the Tampa District substation smells like burnt coffee and recycled air. A lieutenant named Oswald Pace runs the evening watch, not with cruelty, but with the particular exhaustion of a man who has decided that fewer decisions made means fewer problems created. He is 54 years old, has 17 years on the force, and has learned through the accumulation of small institutional lessons that paperwork signed quickly is paperwork that does not come back to you. Jazmine Cole is walked through the rear entrance at 3:41 p.m. Slade at her left arm, Tally half a step behind. The booking officer, a heavy-set man named Garrett, who looks like he would rather be anywhere else, looks up from his station and says, "What do we have?" "Fraudulent documentation, possible vehicle theft attempt," Slade says. He places Jazmine's folder on the counter. He does not open it. Jazmine watches this. "The documentation in that folder is complete and valid," she says. "The vehicle was purchased 6 weeks ago through the dealership's fleet desk. A full amount cashier's check was issued. The transaction is on record. I would respectfully suggest verifying the account reference before proceeding." Garrett looks at her. He looks at Slade. Slade shrugs. A small movement, barely visible, but Garrett reads it fluently. "We'll verify through normal channels," Garrett says. He takes the folder and sets it to one side without opening it. Jazmine's jaw tightens once, a half-second tension that vanishes before anyone could call it an expression. She has asked. She has been heard and overruled. The next move is not another request. It is documentation. "I'd like to note for the record," she says, "that I requested immediate verification of the purchase documentation. Florida Statute 901.151 requires that any investigative stop be supported by articulable facts and circumstances. I have not been given a specific articulable reason for this detention." Garrett types something. He does not respond to the statutory citation. Slade, standing to her left, exhales through his nose, a sound with a specific quality, the quality of a person who finds a challenge amusing because they believe it cannot touch them. Tally is writing in her notebook. She is writing with the focused attention of someone summarizing rather than recording, constructing rather than transcribing. Jazmine notices this. She says nothing about it. Pace arrives from the back corridor 7 minutes into booking. He looks at the intake form, looks at Jazmine, and says to Slade, "You ran this through dispatch?" "Vehicle flag came back possible match," Slade says. "Dealership staff confirmed irregular documentation. Detention was appropriate." "The documentation is not irregular," Jazmine says. "It satisfies every requirement under Florida Statute 319.23. The certificate of title application is county stamped. The bill of sale is notarized. The purchase agreement contains the dealership's own fleet desk reference number. The only party who has characterized any of it as irregular is the dealership employee who did not read it before closing the folder." Pace looks at her for a moment. There is something in his expression that might, in different circumstances, be discomfort. "You'll have an opportunity to provide a statement," he says. Then he picks up the intake form, signs the bottom, and hands it back to Garrett. He does not read it first. This is the second signature given today by someone who did not read what they signed. Jazmine notes this too. She has given one phone call. Standard. The officer who supervises it stands 3 feet away, arms crossed, watching. Jazmine dials from memory. No scrolling, no hesitation. The call lasts 1 minute and 22 seconds. Her voice throughout has the calibrated calm of someone issuing instructions they are confident will be followed. She does not explain the situation in detail. She gives 3 specific pieces of information: an address, a time, and a 4-word phrase. And then she says, "That's everything for now," and hangs up. The supervising officer was listening for information that would be problematic, which in practice meant loud, emotional, or explicit. He files this call under none of those categories and moves on. He does not understand the significance of the 4-word phrase. He does not know he should. Jazmine is escorted to a holding room, not a cell technically, but a locked room with a metal bench, a single overhead light, and a camera in the upper right corner. She sits. She sets both hands on her knees, palms down, and she thinks. She thinks about the timeline, about the 47 seconds Claudette spent on the phone, about Slade arriving 11 minutes before the call, a detail she clocked because she had glanced at her watch when she walked through the showroom door and clocked it again when Slade appeared. 11 minutes is not a response time. It is a staging time. She thinks about the email she has not yet seen, but is beginning to suspect exists. The phrase enhanced verification protocol is not language a showroom manager invents on the spot. It is language from a document, from a policy, or something designed to look like one. The kind of language that provides cover, that allows an action to be described as procedure rather than decision. She thinks about Tally's notebook, about the specific way she had been writing, quickly, without pausing to observe, writing from something already prepared. Tally is not operating on instinct. She is operating on a script, not a written one, but the more durable kind, the kind absorbed from years inside a culture that rewards a specific kind of loyalty and punishes the specific kind of honesty that threatens it. She is not the architect of what happened in that showroom. She is the confirming signature on it. That distinction matters, both morally and procedurally. She thinks about Pace, about the 17 years of institutional gravity he carries, the way each year of accumulated small decisions, forms signed without reading, complaints flagged without review, has built not malice, but something arguably more difficult to dismantle: indifference with the weight of experience behind it. Pace is not protecting Slade out of loyalty. He is protecting a version of normalcy he has invested decades in. That is harder to move than loyalty. Loyalty can be betrayed. Normalcy has to be replaced. She thinks about the certified letter from V. Beaumont, about the language enhanced verification protocol, the kind of phrase that takes deliberate effort to construct, that belongs to a document written before any incident occurred. Documents like that are not written in response to a situation. They are written to produce one. She thinks about the third recipient in Claudette's email, the redacted address, the copy that was blinded out before the version Marcus has ever seen, which means Marcus's copy is already incomplete, and whoever received the third copy knew, when they requested the blind, that it might be needed. She thinks about Marcus and the piece of paper inside his jacket. Then she stops thinking and simply waits. There is a difference between waiting and enduring. Enduring implies that the present moment is something to be survived. Waiting implies that the present moment is a phase, one that will end, on a schedule that you understand better than anyone in the building. Jazmine Cole is waiting. At his desk, Slade completes his incident report. He notes that the subject was uncooperative with standard verification requests and made repeated references to legal statutes in a manner consistent with attempting to obstruct the investigation. He notes that the documentation presented appeared inconsistent with dealership records. He does not note that he arrived in the parking lot 11 minutes before the call came in. He does not note that Claudette closed the documentation folder without reading it. He does not note that the vehicle flag that appeared on the dispatch system had been entered manually, entered specifically at 3:14 p.m., which is 6 minutes before the official call log shows the dealership's report. He uploads his body camera footage. The upload confirmation reads, "File processed. Video file, not available. Audio file, available." He reads this and nods. Standard. Equipment malfunctions happen. He assumes the video is simply gone. The audio, however, runs 41 continuous minutes, from the moment he pulled into the dealership parking lot to the moment he handed Jazmine Cole to the booking officer. It includes, at the 4-minute mark, a conversation he had with Claudette Rowe in the dealership's small back office, before either of them had approached Jazmine. In that conversation, Claudette says several things, specific things, and Slade responds, and the exchange between them establishes something that a careful listener would recognize as coordination rather than report-taking. She fits the pattern, Slade says, at the 4-minute and 30-second mark. Let's get this done. He does not know the audio is intact. He does not check. He fills in the malfunction notation, closes the upload window, and begins writing the next line of his report. 2 floors up and across the building, in the Internal Affairs Intake Office, a request has just arrived. Not from Jazmine Cole's complaint, which has not yet been filed, but from a separate source. A flagged inquiry into an audio file from badge 2241, case number FL202408814, submitted with a note from the building's IT record specialist. The note says simply, "Audio running, timestamp intact, recommend review." The intake officer, a man named Cyrus Holt, reads the note. He sets it in a folder. He opens his calendar and marks Thursday of next week. Then he sets the folder on the left side of his desk, which is where things go when they are not urgent, but are also not the kind of thing you lose. He does not yet know the name Jazmine Cole. He will. In the holding room, Jazmine is still sitting with her hands on her knees. The overhead light buzzes at a frequency most people find irritating after 20 minutes. She finds it neither irritating nor comforting. It is simply a sound, the way the metal bench is simply a surface, the way the locked door is simply a temporary condition. Tomorrow, charges will not be filed. The Hillsborough County District Attorney's Office will review Slade's arrest report, note the absence of any articulable basis meeting the probable cause threshold, and decline prosecution. A desk supervisor will call the substation. Garrett will take the call, transfer it to Pace, and Pace will sign a release form with the same unhurried efficiency with which he signs everything, quickly and without reading it first. Jazmine will collect her belongings, portfolio, phone with a dead battery, keys, and walk out of the substation into a morning that has gone entirely gray. She will not call anyone from the parking lot. She will sit in a borrowed car for 8 minutes, screen dark, doing nothing that looks like anything. Then she will drive. She will not go back to her apartment. She will go instead to a parking structure on Kennedy Boulevard, level 3, where she will sit for 20 minutes more. At the 17-minute mark, she will send a single message, 4 words, to a contact stored in her phone under initials only. The response will come in under 90 seconds. 3 words. Received, stand by. Jazmine will read that, set the phone face down on the passenger seat, and look at the concrete wall in front of her car. Something in her expression will shift. Not relief exactly, more like the confirmation of a calculation that had a predicted outcome and now has an actual one. The two match closely enough. She will allow herself 40 seconds to simply sit with that. Then she will start the engine. The first 48 hours after an arrest without charges exist in a peculiar institutional space. The system has touched you and then released you, but the record of that contact remains, logged, searchable, permanent. Jazmine Cole understands this better than most. She also understands that this period is when the people who detained you are busiest, because they are doing the work of making their version of events coherent before anyone begins asking pointed questions. She gives them those 48 hours. She does not file anything. She does not call anyone publicly connected to the situation. She returns to her apartment, replaces the battery on a secondary device, and begins making a very different kind of preparation. She starts with a single sheet of paper and writes in columns what she knows, what she can verify, and what she suspects but cannot yet prove. The first column fills quickly. The second is shorter, but growing. The third is the most interesting, and it carries a pattern that, once she writes it out, stops being a pattern and becomes a plan. The first layer of what is coming is social. It arrives within 24 hours. Claudette Rowe contacts a local business news correspondent, a woman who covers the commercial real estate and dealership sectors for a Tampa area outlet. The conversation is not recorded officially, but the story that appears the following morning describes a significant attempt to fraudulently claim a high-value vehicle at a luxury Tampa dealership with documentation that failed to clear standard verification protocols. Jazmine is not named. The description is sufficient. A woman, late 20s to mid-30s, presented paperwork that dealership staff determined was irregular. Police were called. The matter was referred for further investigation. The story is 4 paragraphs. It is careful. It is also false in its framing in 3 specific and documentable ways, which Jazmine knows because she is one of the people who can document them. She reads the piece twice, flags it, moves on. Claudette, for her part, has a gift for narrative. She has been managing the showroom floor for 11 years, and what that tenure has taught her, above sales targets, above staff management, above every other operational skill, is that the story told first tends to become the story accepted. She is not malicious in any dramatic way. She is, more precisely, a person who has never seriously questioned the advantage she holds in any room she walks into, and who, when that advantage is contested, reaches for the nearest instrument of restoration. In the showroom, that instrument is policy. Outside it, that instrument is the phone. What Claudette does not understand, what she has no frame of reference for understanding, is that she called a police officer who had already arrived. That the sequence she believed she controlled was already moving before she touched it. That the person she attempted to remove from her showroom had been, in a meaningful sense, several steps ahead of this moment before she even knew the moment would come. The professional layer arrives on day 3 in the form of a certified letter to an address that Claudette Rowe should not have had access to. The letter is from the law offices of someone named V. Beaumont, representing Premier Porsche of Tampa, and it states that the vehicle in question, the one Jazmine had been attempting to improperly claim, has been retained pending resolution of an ongoing legal matter, and that any further attempt to collect the vehicle without formal legal process would be treated as trespassing under Florida Statute 810.09. The letter is 4 pages. The legal citations are real. The argument they support is not. Jazmine reads it once, places it in the folder behind the purchase agreement, and writes a response. The response is 2 paragraphs. It cites the purchase agreement, the bill of sale, the county stamped title application, and Florida Statute 319.23, the same statute she cited in the substation, and notes that the vehicle is not the subject of any pending legal matter that the responding party has been notified of, and that withholding a validly purchased vehicle without legal process constitutes conversion under Florida common law. She requests a written response within 7 business days. She sends it via certified mail. She keeps a copy. She does not show this letter to anyone affiliated with her work. Not yet. This is hers to manage, and she manages it with the competence of someone who does not need to call for help to handle a certified letter from a civil attorney. Fletcher Odom is the one who escalates to the legal layer. He contacts the Tampa Police Department's Property Crimes Unit with a written statement that claims Jazmine had presented documentation bearing alterations inconsistent with authentic dealership records, a specific claim and a specific lie, one that requires some knowledge of what actual fraudulent documentation looks like to sound credible. Fletcher has that knowledge, which is itself an interesting detail. His statement is 5 handwritten pages. Odom submits it to Lieutenant Pace's unit, bypassing the intake desk through a contact he clearly already has. Fletcher Odom has spent 14 years in automotive finance, and he has a technician's mentality applied to a contractor's ethics. He is skilled at finding the precise gap in any agreement, the exact sentence that a layperson will read as protection, but that actually functions as exposure. He is the kind of person who reads fine print not to understand it, but to use it, and who in any dispute over documentation will have already identified the 3 points he will contest before the other party has finished presenting their case. He had done exactly that during Jazmine's first visit 6 weeks earlier. When she had cited the clause in the purchase agreement from memory, he had gone quiet, not surprised that she knew the clause, but recalculating what knowing it implied about who he was dealing with. He had filed that recalculation and arrived at the wrong conclusion, that she was a sophisticated buyer, perhaps a paralegal or a contracts administrator, someone who knew the standard language. He had not arrived at the right conclusion because the right conclusion was beyond the range of what he was looking for. His statement to the Property Crimes Unit is technically precise and factually wrong, a combination he has worked with before. He knows that alterations inconsistent with authentic records is difficult to disprove without the original records present in the same room as the person making the claim. He knows that ambiguity is its own form of weapon. What he does not know is that Jazmine has the original records, every version, including the one with the Fleet Desk's internal reference stamp, the one that was generated by the dealership's own system and cannot, therefore, have been altered by someone outside it. He submits the statement on a Friday afternoon. Pace receives it and adds it to the file. By the end of the day, a note has been added to the arrest record, flagging the matter for continued investigation pending review of additional documentation. Tally's role in this period is quieter, but no less deliberate. In the 3 days following the arrest, she makes 2 amendments to her incident notes, both dated retroactively, both adding details that her original shorthand did not include. The amendments describe Jazmine as having made statements indicating prior familiarity with detention procedures, which is true, but framed in a way that implies something it does not mean, and as having displayed knowledge of internal police processes inconsistent with a civilian encounter. Both lines are written to cast her composure as suspicious. Both lines are written by someone who knows how case files are read and what language raises flags in a review. What none of them know, not Slade, not Odom, not Pace, is that Jazmine Cole has by this point submitted a formal, written complaint to Tampa PD's Internal Affairs Division. The complaint is 8 pages. It cites Florida Statute 901.151 and notes the absence of any articulable basis for the initial stop. It includes a time-stamped account of the 11-minute gap between her arrival and Slade's. It requests the body camera footage from badge 2241 and the dispatch log from the afternoon in question. She submits it on Thursday. By Friday afternoon, it is sitting in Cyrus Holt's folder, the one on the left side of his desk, next to the note about the audio file. He has not yet put the two together. On Monday he will, and what he will see when he does will alter the shape of his Thursday. Pace signs the "no basis for investigation" notation on Jazmine's complaint within 24 hours. He does not interview her. He does not pull the body camera record. He does not note in his response that an IT flag on the same badge number is sitting in the same building. He signs with the same motion he uses for everything. Forward lean, pen across the bottom, set it aside. The response letter arrives at Jazmine's address on the following Tuesday. She reads it, makes a copy, and adds it to the folder. The folder is getting thick. What happens on day 6 is physical, and it is the moment at which the full shape of what Jazmine is dealing with becomes undeniable, even though she had suspected its outline since the showroom. She is at the substation, not under arrest. She has come in voluntarily to follow up on a secondary matter related to the certified letter, a process that requires a brief interaction with Garrett at the booking desk. She is waiting for him to locate a form. Slade enters through the rear corridor. He does not see her immediately. She is seated along the far wall, facing away from the corridor entrance. He says something to Tally, who is at a nearby desk, before either of them registers Jazmine's presence. What he says specifically is, "Beaumont's team is shoring up the documentation issue. If she files anything with the AG, we'll be ready." Jazmine does not react. She holds very still. She does not write anything down. She does not need to. Memory for her is not a passive function. She is, at this precise moment, recording. Slade turns and sees her. There is a half-second in which his expression does what faces do when they have been caught being themselves in public. A brief recalibration, quick enough that most people would not catch it. Jazmine catches it. She has been catching things like that for years. He crosses the room without speaking and enters the corridor that leads to the holding area. A moment later, the door at the far end opens, then footsteps in the corridor, then the door at the near end. Slade steps into the holding area where Jazmine is waiting. "You keep showing up here," he says. "That's not going to help your situation." "I'm here on a clerical matter," she says. "I'll be done shortly." He moves toward her. Not fast, not aggressive technically, the way a person moves when they are occupying space deliberately, when the message being communicated is proximity itself. He stops close enough that she can see the ink stain on his left shirt cuff. He says quietly, "Some situations work themselves out best when people stay home." Jazmine stands. The movement is fluid, immediate, and terminates with precisely 18 inches of space between them. Space she created, on her terms, with a single step and a pivot that does not look like a pivot. It looks like standing up. To anyone watching, she simply stood. To anyone trained in what she knows, she did considerably more than that. Slade blinks. Something in his body language recalibrates. A subtle loss of the certainty that had walked him across the room. "I appreciate the advice," she says. Her voice has not changed register in the slightest. "I'll keep it in mind." Garrett returns to the desk with the form. Jazmine takes it, fills it in, and slides it back across the counter. Then she picks up her portfolio, thanks Garrett, and walks to the exit. The camera at the end of the corridor is running. It has been running the entire time. Slade knows it is there. He works in this building. What he does not know, and what the morning will eventually confirm, is that this particular camera was upgraded 3 months ago and now records in high definition with a 90-day storage cycle rather than the 30-day cycle of its predecessor. The IT department sent an update to all station supervisors. Pace, characteristically, did not read past the subject line. Jazmine Cole steps out of the substation into a gray afternoon and does not look back. Behind her in the corridor, Slade stands for a moment. Then he goes to find Tally. They have some things to get straight before anyone asks about the paperwork. 40 minutes later, Jazmine pulls into the parking structure on Kennedy Boulevard. This time, she does not stop on level 3. She goes to level 5, which is open air, and parks near the eastern edge. She gets out of the car and stands at the barrier, looking out over the city. Her left forearm, where Slade's grip had landed during the showroom arrest, carries a bruise she has documented, photographed 3 times in the past 6 days, time-stamped, filed. The bruise is fading now, which means the window for physical evidence of that specific incident is closing. She already has what she needs from it. What she needs now is different. What she needs now is someone on the inside who will tell the truth. Not because the truth is absent. There is more truth in her folder than most cases see in their entirety. But because truth presented by the person it happened to carries a different weight than truth confirmed by someone who was standing next to the people who caused it. She thinks about Marcus, about the paper inside his jacket, about the way he had folded it, carefully, quickly, as if he had been waiting for the moment to do it. She has not approached him, not yet. She does not want to create a situation where his action appears coordinated with hers, where it can be characterized as something other than what it is, an individual making a choice. That characterization matters. It will matter a great deal, in the right room, at the right moment. But she is beginning to calculate when that moment might be. Below her, Tampa extends in every direction, the bay to the south, the interstate curving west, the flat commercial sprawl of West Shore running toward the airport. Somewhere in that sprawl, a dealership showroom is still open, and a woman behind a curved reception desk is still, almost certainly, making calls. A finance manager is still in his office. A police officer is still writing things into a record. And somewhere, probably in a small break room or a service bay, a young man in a gray uniform is deciding whether to be the thing that changes everything or the thing that keeps quiet and lets everything stay the same. Jazmine Cole does not know which he will choose. She has a working hypothesis. She gives it, conservatively, a 70% probability. In her experience, 70% is good odds when you have nothing else to apply leverage to. She has quite a bit else to apply leverage to. She gets back in the car. Her phone is lit on the passenger seat. One notification from the contact stored under initials. She reads it. Then she sets the phone face down on the passenger seat and looks at the concrete wall in front of her car. Something in her expression shifts. Not relief exactly. More like the confirmation of a calculation that had a predicted outcome and now has an actual one. The two match closely enough. She allows herself 40 seconds to simply sit with that. Then she starts the engine. The folder on the back seat is holding everything she has gathered. Purchase agreement, bill of sale, title application, certified letter, her complaint to Internal Affairs, the response that dismissed it, the photograph of the bruise on her forearm, time-stamped, a single-page account of Slade's words in the substation corridor, transcribed from memory within the hour she heard them, signed and dated by her own hand. It is not yet full. What it lacks is the thing that transforms a collection of evidence into a case. Not more facts, but the one fact that connects all the others from a direction no one in this story has thought to protect against. That fact is on a folded piece of paper inside the jacket of a man named Marcus Webb. It has been there for 8 days, and he has not yet decided what to do with it. He will make that decision sooner than he thinks. Marcus Webb makes his decision on a Tuesday. It is not dramatic. He does not agonize over it through the night, does not arrive at it through any particular moment of clarity. He arrives at it the way most difficult decisions are actually made, through the steady accumulation of smaller moments that each, individually, could be rationalized away, but that together have a weight he can no longer distribute across his conscience in a way that lets him sleep. The first of those moments was the Wednesday afternoon itself, when he watched Jazmine Cole be walked out of the showroom in handcuffs while her documents, clean, stamped, legitimate in every visible way, lay scattered on the floor. The second was when Fletcher Odom came into the service bay the following morning and said, without preamble, that any staff member who had witnessed the prior day's incident should refer all questions to management. The third was when Marcus found the email, not the partial version, the full version, the one that had been printed by Claudette's assistant and left, through what was either carelessness or contempt for the possibility that anyone would look, in the recycling tray of the break room printer. He had read it twice. Then he had folded it, put it in his jacket, and gone back to work. He had carried it for 8 days. He had thought about what it meant for 8 days. And on the 9th day, a Tuesday, he drives to the address he found through a search. Not for Jazmine Cole, whose address he does not have, but for the Internal Affairs Office of the Tampa Police Department, where he has been told a complaint has been filed, and where, the building directory confirms, a Cyrus Holt works. He does not call ahead. He sits in the lobby for 40 minutes before Holt comes out. Cyrus Holt is 46 years old, medium build, with the particular quality of stillness that belongs to people who spend their professional lives listening to accounts of things that went wrong inside institutions they are part of. He is not cynical, or rather he has chosen, deliberately, not to be, because he has watched what cynicism does to investigators and decided it is a form of professional decay he cannot afford. He looks at Marcus the way he looks at everyone who walks into his office voluntarily, with attention and without assumption. Marcus places the folded email on the desk. He says, "I work at Premier Porsche. I've had this for 9 days. I don't know if it means what I think it means, but I know I can't keep carrying it." Holt unfolds it. He reads it once, then again. His expression does not change. What changes is the quality of his stillness. It becomes the particular stillness of a person who has just found the piece that makes sense of a picture they have been looking at from the wrong angle. The email is dated 2 days before Jazmine Cole walked into the showroom. It is from Claudette Rowe to Fletcher Odom, with a blind carbon copy to a third address, the domain of which, partially visible despite the attempt to redact it, belongs to a city contractor. The body reads, in its relevant section, Transaction Reference 774-B, Customer Inquiry Pattern and Demographic Profile warrant enhanced verification protocol. Coordinating with our contact at the unit level, please ensure documentation review triggers standard delay on Wednesday. Standard delay, not a search, not a verification, a delay designed in advance for a specific appointment for a specific person. Holt sets the email down. He says, "How did you come to have this?" Marcus tells him. Holt writes. Then Holt picks up the phone and makes a call. The call is to the IT specialist who flagged the body cam audio 9 days ago and who has been waiting with the particular patience of someone holding something important and unsure when to hand it over for precisely this kind of instruction. Pull the audio from case FL 2024-08814, Holt says. Full file. Chain of custody documentation. I need it in my office by end of day. The IT specialist says it will be ready in 2 hours. It is ready in 90 minutes. Holt listens to 41 minutes of audio with the door closed and his notepad open. He pauses it 4 times. He writes 4 things. At the 4-minute and 30-second mark, he writes down the exact phrase, "She fits the pattern. Let's get this done." and puts a box around it. At the 22-minute mark, he writes the dispatch log discrepancy. Slade's arrival 11 minutes before the call, confirmed now in real-time audio by the ambient sound of his engine cutting off in the dealership's rear lot. At the 34th minute, he writes the name Bryn Talley, and next to it a question mark, because what he hears at that moment, Slade and Talley exchanging a summary of Jazmine's booking paperwork that includes details that were not available until after Jazmine had spoken, suggests that Talley was present for something before the official call log says she was. He closes the notepad. He opens Jazmine Cole's complaint, which has been sitting in his folder for 12 days. He reads it again, this time against the audio, matching her time-stamped account to the recorded one. They align, not approximately, precisely. He opens a new form. He writes the date. He writes, "Initiated, Internal Affairs Formal Investigation." He writes the badge numbers. He writes the case number. Then he picks up the phone again and dials a different extension, the one that goes to the Hillsborough County State Attorney's Office, Civil Rights Division. The person who answers is not the person he needs, but she knows who he needs, and that person calls back within 20 minutes. What Holt does not yet know, what he will learn when he FOIA requests the dispatch log and receives it 3 days later, is that the vehicle flag entered into the system at 3:14 p.m. on the Wednesday in question was entered not from a patrol unit, but from a terminal inside the substation building. A terminal assigned during that shift to a workstation logged in under Lieutenant Oswald Pace's credentials. Pace did not enter it himself. Pace, during that shift, was in a meeting on the second floor. Someone used his terminal while he was away from his desk. This is the detail that turns a pattern of misconduct into a chain. Because someone accessed a superior's logged-in terminal to precede a vehicle flag before an arrest had been made or a complaint called in. That is not negligence, that is preparation, and preparation requires coordination. Holt requests the building access log for that afternoon. He will have it in 4 days. Meanwhile, Jazmine Cole has been contacted. She receives a call from Holt's office at 9:14 a.m. on a Wednesday, exactly 1 week after Marcus walked through the lobby. She is asked to come in at her earliest convenience for a formal recorded interview. She says she can come in that afternoon. She arrives at 2 p.m. with the folder. She places it on Holt's desk and says, "I've documented everything from the day of the incident. Timestamps, photographs, written accounts within 24 hours of each event. I can walk you through it in any order." Holt looks at the folder. It is, he will later note in his investigative log, more comprehensively organized than most case files submitted by attorneys. "Let's start from the beginning," he says. She tells him, all of it. Not quickly, thoroughly. She accounts for the 11-minute gap. She accounts for Slade's words in the corridor. She accounts for Talley's notebook, the retroactive amendments she suspects were made, the certified letter from V. Beaumont. She accounts for the conversation she overheard in the substation. Beaumont's team is shoring up the documentation issue. She accounts for Pace's signature on the dismissal of her complaint, obtained within 24 hours without an interview. She does not speculate. She does not characterize. She states what she observed, when she observed it, and what documentation she has to support each account. When she finishes, Holt is quiet for a moment. "Ms. Cole," he says, "I want to be transparent with you about what I can and cannot tell you at this stage. I can tell you that this office has opened a formal investigation. I can tell you that we have received corroborating material from an independent source. I can tell you that the scope of this investigation now extends beyond the initial incident." He pauses. "I cannot tell you how it will end or on what timeline. These investigations typically take months, not weeks. What I can commit to is that your documentation will be treated as evidence and entered into the formal record today." Jazmine nods. "I understand institutional timelines," she says. "I'm not asking for speed. I'm asking for accuracy." Holt holds her gaze for a moment, longer than the conversation requires. Something in her bearing, the specificity of her language, the comprehensive preparation of her documentation, the absence of any emotional appeal in favor of procedural precision, registers with him. He has interviewed hundreds of complainants. Most of them, even the ones with legitimate grievances, eventually reach for the human argument because the procedural one feels insufficient. Jazmine Cole has not reached for it once. She is operating entirely on the record. He writes something on his notepad that is not related to the immediate question. He does not explain what it is. The investigation moves on two parallel tracks after that. The internal track, Holtz, proceeds through the substation building. Access logs, terminal records, the audio file, tallies amended notes. The external track moves through the state attorney's office, where an attorney named Priscilla Nance has been assigned to assess whether the material supports referral for criminal review under 18 United States Code, Section 242, deprivation of rights under color of law, or whether the civil track under 42 United States Code, Section 1983, is the more viable route. Nance requests a meeting with Jazmine within the week. The meeting happens in a conference room at the state attorney's office. Neutral ground, which Nance has chosen deliberately. She is 51, direct without being harsh, and has spent 22 years assessing cases exactly like this one. Cases where the evidence is credible and the institutional resistance is structural. The email, Nance says, after Jazmine has walked her through the folder, is the piece that changes the character of this from a complaint about individual conduct to a complaint about coordinated conduct. Individual misconduct is harder to prosecute. Coordinated misconduct, where you can show pre-planning, communication between parties, and a shared intent, that's a different evidentiary picture. The dispatch log discrepancy supports pre-planning, Jazmine says. The email establishes communication 2 days in advance. The audio confirms the coordination on the day of the incident. 3 distinct corroboration points, independent sources. Yes, Nance looks at the folder again, then at Jazmine. Miss Cole, I want to ask you something directly. The documentation you produced, the organized structure, the time stamping, the statutory citations, this is not how most people document a complaint. This is how people with training in evidence collection document a complaint. The room is quiet for a moment. I'm thorough, Jazmine says. Nance accepts this without pushing. She makes a note. Then she says, the dealership's exposure is significant. Florida Civil Rights Act, Section 760.08, discrimination in places of public accommodation. The email establishes intent. The pattern of documented stops by Officer Slade over the preceding 20 months. 9 stops, 8 of which involve black drivers, all 8 declined by the DA, establishes a broader context. That context will matter, both in any criminal proceeding and in any civil action. The civil action is being prepared separately, Jazmine says. Nance nods. I assumed it would be. The formal hearing is scheduled for 6 weeks after Holt opens the investigation. The venue is the Tampa Community Oversight Board, a joint session open to the public, co-convened with a representative from the Florida Attorney General's Tampa field office. It is not a trial. It is an administrative disciplinary hearing for Officer Derek Slade and Corporal Bryn Talley, with the secondary question of supervisory liability addressed through Lieutenant Pace's file. The hearing room is smaller than most people expect these proceedings to happen in. 12 seats for the panel and observers, a central table, a court reporter in the corner. Slade arrives with a union attorney, a compact man named Adrian Ewell, who has represented officers in disciplinary proceedings for 19 years, and whose entire professional posture communicates that he has seen this before and prevailed before and will do so again. Claudette Rowe is present, also with counsel. Fletcher Odom is not. Fletcher Odom tendered his resignation to the dealership 3 days before the hearing date, and his attorney has communicated in writing that Mr. Odom will be invoking his Fifth Amendment right not to incriminate himself in response to any questions related to the incident. His resignation letter, a copy of which is now in Holt's file, references personal reasons and a desire to pursue other opportunities. It says nothing about the email. It says nothing about the conversation overheard in the substation. It says nothing about the documentation flag entered from Pace's terminal. His silence in the hearing room will be the loudest thing said there. Holt opens the proceedings. He presents the investigation summary, 11 pages organized chronologically with exhibits labeled and numbered. He does not editorialize. He reads. The union attorney Ewell sits to Slade's left with a yellow legal pad and a pen he has not uncapped. He has reviewed the summary in advance. His job today is not to learn the facts, but to manage their reception. He has done this for 19 years, and he is, within a narrow frame, very good at it. He knows which objections land, which ones merely signal that he is paying attention, and which questions to ask during cross that create enough procedural noise to give a panel something to weigh against a clear finding. He is preparing to do all of those things. He has not yet seen all of the exhibits. Exhibit 1, the body cam audio file from badge 2241, case FL 20240-8814, authenticated by IT specialist Daniel Corey, downloaded from the department server on November 4th, chain of custody documented, duration 41 minutes. He plays 2 excerpts. The first is at the 4-minute 30-second mark, Slade in the dealership's back office with Claudette, before any approach is made. The panel hears, "She fits the pattern, let's get this done." The second is at the 19-minute mark, in the cruiser, Slade to Tally, "Beaumont's people know, we just need the paperwork to hold for 30 days. 30 days is the statute of limitations window on certain administrative challenges. Someone understood the timeline well enough to plan around it." Ewell objects to the first excerpt on authentication grounds. The objection is noted and overruled. He objects to the second on relevance, also overruled. Slade sits beside his attorney and does not move. He has the practiced composure of someone who has been told, very clearly and more than once, to display nothing. Not indignation, not dismissal, not the flicker of recognition that crosses a face when it hears its own words played back in a room it never anticipated being in. He is performing blankness. It is a credible performance. The problem is that the room is not watching his face. It is watching the panel's faces, and the panel's faces are doing what they do when recorded evidence reaches them without ambiguity. They are becoming still, and in that stillness they are arriving at conclusions they are not yet required to state out loud. Exhibit 2, the dispatch log, FOIA obtained, for the afternoon of October 22nd. The log shows the vehicle flag entered at 3:14 p.m. The log shows the entry terminal as Workstation 7, substation building, 2nd floor. The building access log, Exhibit 3, shows Lieutenant Pace badging out of the 2nd floor conference room at 3:11 p.m. and badging back in at 3:19 p.m., an 8-minute gap during which his terminal was unattended and logged in. The log shows one other badge entry on that floor during those 8 minutes, Slade, who had arrived at the substation building at 3:09 p.m. The panel absorbs this. One member, a retired county judge named Adele Frost, writes something on her notepad and underlines it. She does not share what it is. Exhibit 4, the email in full, authenticated by forensic metadata, confirming the send date, the server path, and the recipient addresses. The blind carbon copy address, now fully recovered through the server log, belongs to a city contract services account registered to a company whose listed principal is a former Tampa PD sergeant who retired in 2020 with a deferred compensation arrangement that, according to public records, was approved by the same unit commander who later supervised Slade's division. Holt reads the email aloud. All of it. including the line about coordinating with our contact at the unit level, including the instruction to ensure documentation review triggers standard delay on Wednesday. He reads it without inflection, at moderate pace, letting each phrase reach the room on its own terms. The silence that follows lasts 4 seconds. Yule writes something. Claudette's attorney leans toward her. Claudette sits very still. Exhibit 5. The statistical analysis of Slade's vehicle-related detention record over 20 months, January 2022 through September 2024. 9 stops, 8 drivers identified as black in Slade's own incident reports. All 8 subsequently declined by the Hillsborough County DA's office for lack of probable cause. 0 disciplinary actions prior to this hearing. Priscilla Nance, presenting on behalf of the Attorney General's office, notes that the DA's declination rate on Slade's vehicle stops is 4 times the unit average. Yule's response is careful and technically competent. He argues that statistical correlation is not causation, that stops are initiated on articulable facts, that the demographic composition of high-value vehicle theft patterns in the corridor reflects area crime data. He argues that the audio excerpt at 4 minutes 30 seconds is ambiguous, that fits the pattern is consistent with legitimate law enforcement profiling based on prior vehicle reports, not racial profiling. He argues that the dispatch log gap of 8 minutes proves nothing about who entered the flag. Each argument is technically valid. Each argument also has to survive being placed next to the email, which states in plain language what the pattern was and how the Wednesday interaction was prearranged. Nance lets Yule finish. Then she says, Exhibit 4 establishes that the term pattern in Officer Slade's audio had a specific agreed meaning established 2 days prior in written communication with dealership management. The audio does not require interpretation when there is a contemporaneous document defining its terms. Adele Frost looks up from her notepad. I have a procedural question, she says to Yule. The vehicle flag entered at 3:14. Your client's audio places him at the dealership at 3:10. How do you account for the flag being entered from a terminal inside the substation building while your client was in a different location? Yule says he cannot speak to the flag entry, as that falls outside the scope of Officer Slade's conduct. Frost writes something else, underlines it again. Then the panel recognizes Jazmine Cole. She has been in the room since the beginning, at the far end of the table, portfolio closed in front of her. She stands. She does not open the portfolio. What she says from memory, not because she has memorized a speech, but because she has lived every detail of what she is about to describe. And the sequence has been in her mind with the clarity of something documented. On October 22nd, I entered Premier Porsche of Tampa at 2:58 p.m. to collect a vehicle I had purchased in full 6 weeks prior. I presented documentation satisfying every requirement of Florida Statute 319.23 and the dealership's own posted release policy. That documentation was closed without review. A police officer arrived 11 minutes before any complaint was called in. I was detained without being given an articulable basis under Florida Statute 901.151. I was transported to the substation and processed. The Hillsborough County DA declined charges within 24 hours for lack of probable cause. In the days that followed, my formal complaint to Internal Affairs was dismissed within 24 hours without an interview or review of the evidence I had offered to provide. I am not presenting this panel with a description of an unpleasant experience. I am presenting a documented sequence of coordinated conduct that involved a police officer, dealership management, a third party operating under a city contractor account, and the preceding of a vehicle flag from a terminal inside this department's own building. She pauses once. One breath. The documentation in this folder predates this hearing by weeks. Every timestamp, photograph, and written account was created in real time, within hours of each event. I am asking this panel not for sympathy. I am asking for a finding consistent with the evidence. She sits down. The room does not erupt. There are no gasps. What happens is quieter and more durable. The three panel members exchange a look. The kind of look that happens between people who have just arrived simultaneously at the same conclusion. Adele Frost sets down her pen. She does not pick it up again for the remainder of the session. Yule makes one final argument. He says that his client's record prior to this investigation reflects 12 years of service, commendations in 2019 and 2021, and an absence of sustained disciplinary findings. He says that a single incident, even one documented as this one is, does not constitute a pattern of conduct warranting the severity of findings the investigation summary implies. He says the panel should weigh institutional context. Nance waits until he finishes. Then she says, Exhibit 5 establishes that the single incident before this panel is the 9th documented incident fitting an identical profile. Counsel has characterized those 8 prior incidents as not meeting the disciplinary threshold. What the panel is being asked to assess today is whether the threshold has now been met, given that we can now demonstrate through Exhibit 4 that what Officer Slade described as a pattern, his own word in his own recorded voice, was a prearranged coordination rather than an independent law enforcement judgment. Frost says, "Thank you, counsel." She does not say it to Yule. Slade does not speak during the hearing. His attorney has advised against it. He sits with his hands flat on the table in front of him and looks at a point approximately 18 inches above the panel's heads, which is the posture of a man who has decided that the way through this is to give nothing away. He gives nothing away. The evidence at this point does not require anything from him. The deliberation takes 9 days. The findings are issued in a 12-page document publicly filed with the City of Tampa Community Oversight Board on a Thursday morning. Jazmine reads it at her kitchen table, coffee going cold beside her. Officer Derek Slade is suspended without pay, effective immediately, pending completion of the internal affairs investigation. The suspension is indeterminate. It will remain in effect until the investigation closes, which the document estimates at 60 to 90 days. The document does not recommend termination. It recommends a full disciplinary review, which is the procedural precursor to a termination recommendation. It is one step short. Whether the next step follows depends on what the investigation concludes. And investigations like this one have a history of concluding in ways that serve the institution as much as the truth. Corporal Bryn Talley receives a formal written reprimand for submitting retroactively amended incident notes without proper documentation of the amendments. She is not suspended. She is placed on administrative review for 60 days. The reprimand will appear in her personnel file. It is not nothing. It is also not enough, and everyone in that building knows it. Lieutenant Oswald Pace receives a letter of administrative counseling, not a reprimand, a counseling, which is a softer designation, for inadequate supervision of subordinate conduct and insufficient review of complaint materials. He remains in his position. He will not be demoted. The letter will be filed. The building will continue to function more or less as it has. What the letter does not say, what no official document in this proceeding says, is that Pace knew. Not the specifics, not the email, not the preceded vehicle flag, but the shape of what Slade did, the shape of the complaint Jazmine filed, and the speed with which he signed it away. That shape was recognizable to a man with 17 years on the force. The question of whether he chose not to know, or whether he knew and chose to manage it as a local problem rather than a systemic one, is a question his letter does not address and may never be required to. The building access log showing Slade's presence on the 3rd floor at 3:09 p.m. has been referred to the state attorney's criminal division, not as a charge, as a referral for evaluation. The evaluation timeline is, in Nance's estimate, 8 to 12 months. At the end of it, the state attorney will decide whether the evidence supports a criminal filing under 18 United States Code, Section 242, or whether the administrative record is the extent of what the system will produce. Most referrals like this one do not result in prosecution. A smaller number result in a negotiated plea to a lesser charge. An even smaller number go to trial. Nance does not make predictions to Jazmine. She explains the range. Jazmine listens, asks 3 specific procedural questions, and thanks her for her time. The civil lawsuit under 42 United States Code, Section 1983, is filed in the United States District Court for the Middle District of Florida. On the same Thursday, the panel findings are issued. The complaint names Officer Derek Slade, the City of Tampa, and Premier Porsche of Tampa as defendants. It also names, in a separate count under the Florida Civil Rights Act, Section 760.08, a John Doe defendant designated as the holder of the blind carbon copy address, whose identity is now known to Holt's investigation, but has not yet been entered into the public record. The city's legal department will respond within 30 days. The response will invoke qualified immunity for Officer Slade on the Section 1983 claim, the standard first line of defense, arguing that the constitutional violation, even if established, was not clearly established law at the moment of the stop. The legal standard requires both a constitutional violation and a clearly established right. The second prong is where these cases often stall. Nance has already anticipated this. The statistical pattern, 9 stops, 8 black drivers, 0 charges, 0 prior discipline, is precisely the kind of documented pattern that courts have used to establish clearly established rights in prior 11th Circuit decisions. The qualified immunity defense is not frivolous, but it is not as strong as the city's lawyers will make it sound. What has changed, in ways less visible, is the quality of the silence around her. The junior staff, Aaron, the salesman who had once confirmed Jazmine's appointment with genuine helpfulness, the service coordinator who schedules vehicle deliveries, the woman at the insurance desk who had been in the showroom during the arrest and had said nothing, and has said nothing since. All of them now occupy a particular kind of careful distance from Claudette. Not hostility, not mutiny, the specific caution of people who have understood, through the accumulation of public information, that something they were part of is under review, and who are trying to figure out whether they are participants or witnesses. Most of them will be witnesses. One of them, the service coordinator, whose name is Dina, has already received a call from Holt's office and has scheduled an interview for the following week. She did not tell Claudette about the call. This is the first time in 4 years of working at the dealership that Dina has kept anything from her manager. It will not be the last. Fletcher Odom's desk has been cleared. His nameplate is gone. The finance office now has a temporary sign on the door that reads, "By appointment only," because no one has been hired to replace him yet, and because the dealership's legal counsel has advised against certain kinds of continuity until the civil discovery period has concluded. The office smells, faintly, of the cleaning solution used on the day after he left. The day someone, though no one has admitted who, went through his files with a shredder. The civil lawsuit under 42 United States Code, Section 1983, is filed in the United States District Court for the Middle District of Florida on the same Thursday the panel findings are issued. The complaint names Officer Derek Slade, the City of Tampa, and Premier Porsche of Tampa as defendants. It also names, in a separate count under the Florida Civil Rights Act, Section 760.08, a John Doe defendant designated as the holder of the blind carbon copy address, whose identity is now known to Holt's investigation, but has not yet been entered into the public record. The city's legal department will respond within 30 days. The response will invoke qualified immunity for Officer Slade on the Section 1983 claim, the standard first line of defense, arguing that the constitutional violation, even if established, was not clearly established law at the moment of the stop. The legal standard requires both a constitutional violation and a clearly established right. The second prong is where these cases often stall. Nance has already anticipated this. The statistical pattern, 9 stops, 8 black drivers, 0 charges, 0 prior discipline, is precisely the kind of documented pattern that courts have used to establish clearly established rights in prior 11th Circuit decisions. The qualified immunity defense is not frivolous, but it is not as strong as the city's lawyers will make it sound. The lawsuit will not resolve quickly. It will not resolve in months. It will take years, the discovery period alone, during which both sides will be required to produce documents and submit to depositions, will run the better part of 18 months. During that time, most of the pressure in this story will be invisible. Motions filed, motions opposed, hearings before a magistrate, settlement discussions that go nowhere, and then go somewhere, and then go nowhere again. This is how justice actually moves, not in a cascade, in a current, slow, relentless, cold. Jazmine Cole sits at her kitchen table and reads the 12-page finding to the end. She reads it the way she reads everything, front to back, without skipping, without looking for the good news first. She reads the scope of the investigation. She reads the factual findings, each of which is phrased with the careful restraint of institutional language. Evidence supports the conclusion that, rather than, the officer did, because administrative findings have a different evidentiary standard than criminal ones and use language that reflects that difference, which means they are always more tentative sounding than the facts underneath them warrant. She reads the Slade suspension. She reads the Talley reprimand. And she reads the specific language used to describe Talley's amendments to her notes, inconsistent with contemporaneous documentation standards, which is the administrative way of saying she wrote things that were not true after the fact, without calling it what it is. She reads the PACE counseling and the language that surrounds it, inadequate supervisory review, rather than deliberate neglect, which is technically defensible and also, she understands, as far as this document will go. She reads under review regarding the dealership's franchise status and understands what it means. Not resolution, but pressure. Not transformation, but a foundation. The kind of foundation you build before the weather turns. She sets the document down. She picks up her coffee, which has gone cold enough that the first sip is startling. She does not make a face about it. Her phone is on the table, one unread notification from the contact stored under initials. She opens it. 3 words. Well done. Stand by. She puts the phone face down. The folder is still on the table beside her, the same one she carried into the showroom 6 weeks ago, the same one that was scattered across a polished floor while a room full of people decided to look the other way. It is considerably thicker now. It holds the purchase agreement and the bill of sale, the complaint and the dismissal, the photographs and the written accounts, the hearing findings and the civil lawsuit filing. It holds everything she has built, document by document, day by day, in the precise sequence required to turn what happened to her into something the system cannot dismiss with a signature. She will pick up the vehicle. That happens on a Friday, 11 days after the hearing. She arrives at 9 a.m. when the lot is still half empty and the morning light is flat and cool. She signs the release form, the same form she should have signed 6 weeks ago before any of this began, and the young service desk attendant processes it without incident, without a second look, without reaching for a phone. Marcus Webb is the one who brings it around from the service bay. He parks it near the front entrance, steps out, and hands her the keys without ceremony. He holds them out. She takes them. For a moment, neither of them says anything. Then he says, "I hope it's what you were expecting." There is a layer to this. The word expecting, the pause before it, the fact that he is the one saying it, of all the people in this building, of all the people who were present on the Wednesday it all began. She looks at him, Not with warmth, not with coldness, with the particular quality of recognition she reserves for people whose choices have consequences they will carry for a long time. "It's exactly what I ordered," she says. He nods once, stands there for a moment longer than a handoff requires. Then he returns to the bay. She gets in, adjusts the seat, forward 2 clicks exactly. Checks the mirrors in sequence, left, center, right. Places the folder on the passenger seat, starts the engine, which turns over clean, quiet, with the particular restrained authority of something very precisely built. She drives out of the lot and does not look back. But the file on Cyrus Holt's desk is not closed. The building access log entry, Slade, 3rd floor, 3:09 p.m., has been cross-referenced with a second entry that arrived in the expanded FOIA response. A city contractor badge, same building, 12 minutes earlier. The contractor badge belongs to the company whose principal is the retired sergeant, the one whose deferred compensation was approved by Slade's former division commander. The name on that contractor badge is not in the public record yet. It is in Holt's log, next to a question mark. The question mark is new. It was not there when he opened the file. It is there now. And somewhere in the email Claudette sent 2 days before the Wednesday in question, there is a blind carbon copy address that has been partially traced but not yet fully identified. The domain resolves to a company. The company has 3 registered officers. 2 of them have nothing to do with law enforcement. The third resigned from a government position 14 months ago, under circumstances described in his personnel file as voluntary departure following departmental restructuring. His name is not in the public record either. It will be. These are threads, not conclusions. The system has learned to move on threads, slowly, with the weight of procedure, on timelines that exhaust most people before they can see the outcome. Most people run out of folder before they run out of fight. Jazmine Cole does not run out of folder. The last thing, before any of this began to resolve itself, was a voicemail she received from a number she did not recognize, left on the night the hearing findings were issued, at 11:47 p.m. The caller does not identify themselves. The message is 8 seconds. What they say is this: "The email you have is not the only one." She has listened to it 6 times. She has not returned the call. The number, when she ran it, traces to a prepaid device purchased at a convenience store on Dale Mabry Highway. No name. No account. Purchased with cash 2 days before the hearing. Someone knew the findings were coming before they were filed. Someone wanted her to know the record is larger than what she holds. She does not know who they are. She knows what their message means. It means the folder she built, complete as it is, thorough as it is, strong enough to have moved a disciplinary panel and opened a federal lawsuit, is still a chapter, not the whole book. She saves the voicemail. She labels the file. She puts it in the folder, which is, of course, the only place it belongs. She closes it, not because it is finished, because she is done for today, and those are different things entirely. Jazmine Cole never raised her voice. She never begged for anyone to believe her. She built her case the only way that holds, one document at a time, one timestamp at a time, one statute verified against the record. What happened to her happens every day to people who do not have what she had: the discipline to document, the composure to wait, and the knowledge that the system moves slowly, but that it does move. If you give it something, it cannot dismiss. The lesson is not that the system worked. It did not work entirely. Slade still has an appeal pending. Pace still reports to the same building. The franchise review is still described as ongoing. The lesson is that preparation is the only form of power that does not require permission. Jazmine walked into that showroom with her documents in order, not because she expected trouble, but because she understood the terrain she was actually in. And when trouble came, she was not scrambling. She was already ready. If this story reminded you that accountability is earned through evidence, not argument, that silence can be a strategy and a folder can be a weapon. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe if you want more stories like this one. And remember, the receipts you keep today are the case you build tomorrow.